Well, for more on this, let's speak to Jan Egeland. He's the Europe Director of Human Rights Watch and a former UN humanitarian official. He joins us via Skype from Oslo. Welcome once again to the program. The UN asking for a huge sum of money, almost $4 billion. How hard is it going to be to raise this money? How is the UN going to make sure that pledges turn into actual donations?
It's going to be too hard, really. It is heartbreaking to see the unmet needs in Syria and the lack of donor enthusiasm now. I cannot recall in recent history this enormous gap between unmet needs and actual aid delivery. And it is particularly bad for the civilian population caught in the crossfire inside of Syria.
What will the effects be if the UN cannot raise this money?
Well, if the UN cannot raise the money, nor will the non-governmental organizations be able to do their work together with the United Nations, there will be a lot of unnecessary suffering, and the people will be punished twice, if you like. First, by the paralysis in the international community in stopping this man-made war. And then we're not even picking up the pieces. We're not even helping women and children in the crossfire with basic supplies and humanitarian relief. I'm optimistic still that more can be done. I hope that Western and Asian and Arab and other donors will step up and do their thing, but so far it's been too little, too late.
If the UN does manage to raise more money, how will they make sure that the money does get into the right hands? A large chunk of the money is meant to go to the Lebanese government, for one, and Hezbollah partially controls that. How are they going to make sure that the money doesn't go into the wrong hands?
Well, there is no excuse from any donors, whether that are private citizens like you and me, or governments, that this is not being controlled adequately. It is going to the countries. It's not only the countries, it's going to the people through a lot of mechanisms. There is a lot of monitoring, there is a lot of auditing, there is a lot of control. The UN, the non-governmental organizations are all controlling this. I am, however, particularly concerned that the lack of cross-border relief, especially from Turkey, makes some parts of the country, and especially the opposition-held parts of the country, become a void, no real humanitarian action at all.
Yes, because, of course, raising the money is one thing, but getting the aid to the people who actually need it is another thing entirely.
It is. The lack of access is the outrage in this horrific war. Also the UN appeal is 2/3 of it, more or less, for those being refugees in Lebanon, in Turkey and Jordan. 2/3 of those in need, however, are inside, and those are the people who are in the most dire straits. So what I hope is that the United Nations system, the Red Cross and Red Crescent, the non-governmental organizations can go on cross-border from Damascus, cross-line across the front lines to civilians inside Syria. Because if not, they will all flee. And is that what we want? To empty Syria and see millions and millions go to the neighboring countries, perhaps to be refugees for a very, very long time. We don't want that.
Jan, if we could look at the humanitarian situation inside Syria, a lot of areas not getting the help, including the area of Qusayr, the city of Qusayr, which has seen a lot of fighting between government forces and rebel forces back and forth in the last few weeks. Is any aid getting in there?
Well, I know that many organizations, including the International Committee of the Red Cross, is trying to get into Qusayr, and they may actually be succeeding as we speak. But there are too many places where it's just too little reaching the place. I was myself a few weeks ago in Aleppo. I mean, it's a 1 million strong city of civilians. There is an active conflict going through the middle of the city, and I couldn't see traces really of international relief from anywhere. And the poor people of Aleppo, they're being at the mercy of the two sides and not getting the humanitarian assistance they need, nor the protection by humanitarian international presence.
Now, so ultimately, any money raised will only be used to deal with the consequences of this war, but not the problem itself, the war itself, right?
No, indeed. And I felt when I was the humanitarian relief coordinator through the UN system, and I'm actually now the incoming Secretary General of the Norwegian Refugee Council, which is very active in all of the countries with Syrian refugees and displaced. I felt as a humanitarian that, you know, we were the default response from an international community that is too weak on political response, too weak in conflict prevention, too weak in conflict resolution. And remember, this conflict was not a natural disaster. This catastrophe was not caused by nature. It was caused by man. There was a regime that started to shoot at their own people when they did peaceful protests. And since then, it's become a horrific war. And as bad as it is today, it can become even much worse if it's not stopped and if there's not much more of an international presence in the place to calm down the parties.
A desperate situation with no end in sight. Jan Egeland, thank you very much for speaking to us once again.
Thank you. Thank you.